we're being exposed to a lot of things in the process of change that's taking place. Transformation is what I really zeroing in on.
Yeah.
I'm tired with revivals and stuff. There's talk about knowing our scroll, the content of our scrolls. It's been out there, and people are like seeking to know what's written on their scroll. If they miss that, they miss their destiny and all the rest of it. How does that all fit in?
I haven't found my scroll, I can tell you that. And so I guess this is what the center of this communication is, the total inverse of that, to make it very clear. That I think God is not withholding from us a secret plan that demands that you need to pray harder, perform better, think deeper, to one day get it. But rather he is the God who continually gives himself into your existence and invites you to participate with him in that creativity. And if there's any scroll, it's one that you write together with God. It's one that you author together with him to see where that is leading. Does that make any sense? I know. Yes. You touched on such a beautiful thing, and I think it is very often our insecurities that has created the God of certainty. So we become aware very quickly that our interpretive structure is reliable maybe 70% of the time, but that other 30%, that could be disastrous. And so I don't really have the 100% certainty for my life, but at least God knows. At least God's certain. Now there's many things that we can be totally assured of. We can be totally assured of his love, of the goodness of his intention, etc. But maybe I can just explore that a bit, because I focused in on you, but this also changes our conception of who God is and how he interacts with us. And I think one of the views that has been very popular in a way is to conceive of God as this entity who stands outside of time, who sees your life from beginning to end. And even if he pokes his finger in every now and then, it's because he already knew he would do it. But God's absolutely certain of everything that's been, that's going to be. And that's how we've defined this omniscience. That he knows every detail. So that view is very deterministic. The future is planned and determined. Even with all our choices, it's determined. The problem with that view is, let's first think, what is the problem for God in that view? First of all, we are happy because God is certain. So we have a bit more certainty. But the unintended implications of such a view of God is that for that God, nothing new ever happens. Okay? And if you're going to look at the dictionary definition of nothing new ever happens, it's bored. Okay. That is, in effect, the omni-boring God. Because, nothing happens for that God. And it's also not really in a true relationship with us, because relationship implies a movement, the interaction, where my interaction with you moves me. But that God becomes immovable, immutable, impossible in so many ways. He's the picture of absolute certainty. Now we construct that vision of God, I think, out of our own insecurity, but the longer we relate to an omniboring God, the more we get bored with that God as well, because he's not really interacting with us. We're just trying to scramble, do our best in that situation. But I see in the incarnation this very fundamental revelation that God involves himself in our temporality, that he gets right down into the midst of all our conflict, all our contradiction, all our here-ness and thisness, and in the midst of this he interacts, and it's a real relationship. And that relationship, for a relationship to be exciting, there's a little bit of unknown. I have fallen in love over the years many times, and it was never with the same woman in a sense. It was always Mary Ann, but she's changed so much. But that is, in a way, what love does. We continually adjust ourselves to one another, and there's something beautifully consistent about that love. But even that love would be boring if it was absolutely changeless. What makes that love changeless is it's consistent. But the very heart of love is this continual transformation. Those who have loved most deeply know that it transforms you. And wow, in Jesus we meet a God who out of his own freedom allows himself to become vulnerable, enters into a relationship with us where he says, this relationship will affect me. But what a beautiful introduction he gives us to a God that's in a real dynamic relationship. He's easily moved with the feelings of our infirmities. He's right in the middle of that. Now, to add a little bit to that, tonight we had to plan this meeting, and we had some brilliant planners. This was the best organized meeting I've ever been with. We got updates every 15 minutes about how many. It was very well planned. Now that plan.
Surprise us!
So within this story, I'm so grateful that some plans can be made. We had to plan our next 8 months or whatever. Plans aren't, all plans are bad. No, plans have got their place. But the plans happen within the context of story rather than the other way around, where there's this big plan in which everything's determined in the God of absolute certainty, and we're just trying to find our way in that plan. Rather, it's you can do your plans together with God, you can decide where to go, but it's all very exciting because God himself is not the God of absolute certainty, but the God of infinite possibility. That instead of standing behind us with a plan, he's the one standing in front of us with possibilities, always drawing us to greater complexity, greater beauty, greater unity, greater love. Maybe I can, to illuminate this idea of story, I can do a quick example. Or should I first give chance for more stories, more questions, or shall I just tell this story? Okay, let me just go. So if you take the 14 billion years that we think this universe has been in existence, and you divide that amount of time into 30 volumes of books, and each volume is 450 pages long. So this is a heck of a long story. And I want to show you your place in that story. The first 20 volumes is gases and stuff just floating. That's the first 20 volumes. After that 20th volume, in volume 21, there's the beginning of the formation of stars and planets, etc. And we get down to, I can't remember the exact figure. You'll find this example in a book called Resting on the Future. But it's by volume like 25, 26 that the first signs of organic life and the planet as we know it starts to appear. It's in the last, let me just skip forward. It's on the last volume, the last page, that humans, the way we know them, enter the story. And it's really on the last little paragraph that modern humans with the consciousness that we are familiar with appears. And so in a very real way, this story has just begun. But all we want to do is try and work out the end. Now, how's all this going to end? I mean, we've just arrived, but we are obsessed with it ending. But I can see through that story that there's this increase of consciousness, and there's this increase of complexity, and it seems like there's this force of love enticing us, pulling us to a place of awareness of God Himself that makes this story so exciting. Did that add anything to your question?
It's scary.
Yeah.
Who's in control?
That's a good question. Because I don't think God has got any interest in control. He's got no interest in controlling your life. Ooh, isn't that exciting? It's scary, but it's exciting. But boy, if God is in control of everything that happens, then either He's sadistic or we're in deep trouble. But it seems like the kind of power that Jesus reveals again is shared power. God's power is shared power. God's power is not the kind of overbearing control, but it's always the kind of power that says, we'll do this together. And instead of me grabbing hold of your life and steering you into the direction that I know you should go to, I'm going to put myself into your hands and say, what do you want to do with me? But it's a very different way of thinking about it.
But I've worked out the end.
Okay.
I know what happens. Love overcomes it all.
Yeah.
That's
Beautiful. Yeah.
That's the complete of it all.
Absolutely. Yes.
Takes care of everything.
Yeah.
But it's still scary.
Yeah. It's definitely not boring. That's exciting. Beautiful. Any other questions?
Wait, just one thing
Yes.
that you kind of said that kind of blew my mind is, okay, about the beginning and how we think the end is.
Yes.
You just took that away from me, so now I don't know what to think.
That's why we have tomorrow.
I guess I'll have to go back.
But there's, the basic idea there is, what was the intention of the author of Genesis? Was it to just give us a historically correct account? Or was it his intuition of how God always creates? Which makes it much more relevant to our lives. How does God come into the chaos, into the unformed, and call forth the beauty that is possible. And that's what we're going to explore.
Okay, I may have to reinvent this.
And these are alternative ideas. There's multiplicities of meanings, and I don't think we'll ever exhaust it. But it's all part. Nothing I say is like, now this what I say is true and not that. It does. There's new possibilities of relating.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, I'm just want to circle back to what you were saying about this undefined self, the subconscious, unadulterated, like yet to be biased self, and just kind of maybe the biological hardware that we have to access that self, and so this is a train of thought that I've been on. I just had never had anybody, I feel, in the sphere maybe have a dialogue around this. So I'm just curious to your thoughts. There's a good TED Talk called Stroke of Genius, where like a neuroscientist had a stroke. She felt her brain shift between her left and her right brain. And as she emerged into the right brain, just the transcendent possibility and the beauty just emerged from within her. And it was just like this spiritual experience she encountered. And now her entire life is devoted to helping people realize the potentiality that we have within our consciousness to engage this beauty. And so it was like a spiritual encounter per se she had. And then with like maybe like the hypnosis, and how hypnosis works with the right brain as well. Like, is there like, what's the role of our biological hardware in order to access the unconscious, unbiased, unadulterated, undefined self? Like, how does that work? And I was just curious what your thoughts are around that.
Well, I know there's some people here that have practiced for 40 years that play that beautiful place of access. Marianne and myself have done some forms of meditation, it's through all the years, but we have been so blessed and gifted this week by Sue, who took us through contemplative prayer. This experience that's ancient practice, it takes on different forms. So I think contemplative prayer is a powerful, wonderful practice to come into, to become more conscious of the things that we're just normally not conscious of. There are other things that works on it as well, and I was excited to have a conversation with Mark. We'll probably do a video on Thursday to explore experience he had, experience I had. I know Ryan had an amazing experience as well. And maybe in the context of what I did tonight, I'll just give a little taste of what it meant for me. We obviously, there's different personality types and things, and I'm very much a head person, a thinker person. So for me to have the bodily experience, to go to the feelings, and it's a little bit more difficult than head. I'm active and analyzing and enjoying concepts and thoughts. And one of the most profound experiences I had a couple of years ago, and it has continued in some form or the other, but its effect has been permanent and profound, is that as a Christian, I grew up with a very definite sense of somewhere in me there's something called self, or true self, created by God. And my job was just to find it and be it. And so I had a very strong sense of identity, a very strong sense of self, and my theology and everything supported that view. And so for me, my physical experience began in my thinking when I was confronted by a new way of how self is constructed, how desires and our stories and all of these things forms us from a very early age. And I spent a year researching But the research eventually became a physical experience. I won't go into so much detail, but I came to the conclusion that at the very heart of our search for meaning, etc., is desire. And desire is not something I just generate within myself. Desire is always mediated and always suggested by others. And this became a crisis of identity. Where did my desires come from? And it took place over a period of a few weeks. But in that time, as my sense of self was so completely deconstructed, I lost all desire. When you lose all desire to the extent where all connection, all attachment is lost, I did not know who I am. I did not even know who God is. But it was almost that experience where Jesus said, into your hands I commit my spirit. It wasn't something I wanted to fight. It wasn't something I wanted to push. It was just something that was happening, and in a very real sense, it was an experience of death. But the self I constructed, the self I knew, the identity I was so selfish, the desires that formed me, all of it was lost. And I could almost view it disappearing. And I wanted to reach out to that self and say, come back, you were so happy in your self-assured illusions. But I kind of knew that although there was a certainty and a security within that identity that I was losing, it was one based upon illusions. And this new sense of consciousness, although there wasn't that certainty, there was an honesty about it, that I could never reach out for that dishonest certainty again. I would rather stay with this honest uncertainty. And when it might have, the intensity of that experience can probably, it was probably a day or so in which I literally just, I don't know how to describe this, but for the first time in my life, I did not see through my own eyes. I was not an embodied perspective. It was almost as if I viewed myself dissolved. And in that process of dissolving, where I knew nothing, I felt nothing, I didn't think of future or past, I thought I was dying, I suddenly found myself loved. And that part of me I could only describe as my unself, my non-self, my uninterpreted self, my self that hasn't found form yet. It's that chaos of nothingness and silence in which I discovered even that part of me that has achieved nothing, that has believed nothing, that has done nothing. Even that part of me is deeply loved into existence by God. And when that happened, suddenly the smallest little things, I remember Marianne and myself, we found a place in Florida at that time. And she would run in the morning. She wanted to run, I wanted to drive to the nearest coffee shop. And we met at the coffee shop. And even the smallest pleasures, because Starbucks is not always a pleasure compared to other coffee shops, but even the smallest pleasures of having that coffee together, suddenly desire was awakened and the sense of self came back. And I was suddenly aware that I have a different point of view in allowing what desires and what relationships are going to form me. So none of us can operate without a sense of self. You need that. It's not something bad or evil, but it is an incredibly beautiful experience to know that you are more than the self you are conscious of. And so part of what we do here, and we're going to do this in another way as well. We're going to start doing some very physical and real exercises and things to help people into that experience. But part of what I have been doing is to, in the gentlest way, try and assist and work together with the Spirit of God in breaking down the boundaries within our concepts that doesn't allow us a new experience and a deeper awareness. That's what we're involved in.
Andre, are you familiar with Star Trek?
I am.
This thought came to me. It's like Captain Jean-Luc Picard.
Yeah.
You remind me of him on the bridge, being progressive, advanced, truthful, and strong.
Sure.
And a couple of times as you've been, sharing all this,
Yeah.
which is a lot of it's quite new to me,
Yeah.
that's what came to me.
Thank you.
And a lot of that is looking into
Yeah.
other boundaries, and it's all all creation.
Yeah.
So I saw that, and then I was thinking, I spent a lot of time studying Calvinism, Arminianism, which is everybody looking for truth, right?
Yeah.
Can you share something on that? Like, is that a time not spent well, or just trying to get something?
Yes. I think so much of what we believe we've just inherited from our family, from our community. And so a lot of our beliefs are untested assumptions. And I think there has to come a time where you do have the boldness to say, I'm going to unwrap this idea. I'm going to unwrap this thought and see where it came from. Now, for us, as teenagers, we met and we were just overwhelmed with a God who loved us. And we didn't quite know in the community where we ministered, the way in which you minister in a new place is you first tell people how depraved and sinful and sorry they are. And once you get them totally down, you give them a hope that maybe God can help them out in this way. So the devil, hell, sin, that was half our gospel, supposed to be. But we as 18-year-olds, we were just overwhelmed with God's love. And we read that scripture, 2 Corinthians 5:19. God has reconciled the world to himself, not holding their trespasses against them. And I didn't know how that worked with all my other doctrines. But I knew this experience is real for me. God is one who overwhelms us with his goodness, even when we don't even know it. And so we started traveling into Africa. And we caused a bit of a hassle because we would go and minister. I remember one place in Zimbabwe, we were with a local church. We went into a park and we prayed for people for healing and prophesied over. And they were being blessed. But the minister was quite upset that we didn't first lead them to Christ. That happened later on as well. So what I'm saying through that story is through the years, we had to go back and say, the thing that led us to re-examine all our doctrines is this encounter with God, where we knew beyond a doubt he's better than what we've imagined. And there's a lot of my doctrinal little boxes that doesn't line up with this God of goodness. And for years, I just ignored them. But the shelves got so full. At one stage, I decided, okay, let's go for it and look through all these things. Where did that belief come from? How did it develop? And it's in a way, quite a courageous thing to do, because maybe 80% of the things that I thought was fundamental to my Christian faith just turned out to be nothing. And the 20% that was worth treasuring is this the truth. You should be able to examine it from every angle and it remains true. You should be able to question it. And so the idea that I grew up with, that Jesus is the answer to all your questions, was replaced when I actually met Jesus and realized he's the one who questions all my answers. Okay? He's the one that continually says, oh, really? You're sure about that? Let me surprise you. And so one thing it has also done for us is it has enabled us to, without any fear, speak in every kind of community you can imagine. Not only the most extreme ends of the Christian community, but into other communities as well. Because if you don't come just with the certainty of you right, but with an appreciation of beauty and truth, there's so much resonance that we can find with one another in that place. So it opens up conversation. But thank you so very much for that picture, because I loved, let's go where no man has gone before, and love that. Love it, yeah.
But you do, I hope, truly believe that Jesus died for our sins,
Yes.
and that he rose again.
Yes.
And that if we believe that,
there is absolutely, there's such beauty in all of what is communicated in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus.
okay, you
That
don't
is-
think that that's just fairy tale, or
No, that has such great meaning for me, and for I can see for you, absolutely. And there was a time, to make this as honest as I can, where everything that I thought it meant also crumbled. Where what I thought happened at the cross, I realized was my own construct of what happened. But it was really in that place of deconstruction that greater beauty and greater meaning came out of that event. So for me, it is only this place of being open for God to reveal himself beyond my certainties has only brought about greater beauty and meaning in those events. Okay, bless you. Bless you. Bless you. Any other thoughts? So, tomorrow, yeah.
Can you explain a little bit more to us about living in the moment
Yeah,
and the kingdom within,
yeah.
and how God reveals himself in that?
So the question is exploring living in the moment
Living from within.
and living from within in that kingdom. So I want to put all the questions in the context of what we said tonight. So if you remember the example of the music, that there's a history to it that adds to the meaning of this particular sound that is resonating at this moment. But this particular sound is not just a summary of what came before, it is also an anticipation of what is about to come. I think we are currently living on that creative edge between all that has been and all that could be. But what we've all often done with the certainty of our structures of interpretation is we've left very little room for the God of infinite possibility. And we have created our expectations for the future based on our past interpretation. So the past wants to so convince you and so occupy you so that your present is actually squashed and grabs a hold of your future and convince you that the future has got nothing new, that it's just a repetition of the past, that it's just going to continue in the same pattern. There might be a few things that are different, but with your certain structure of interpretation, you can already predict it. And you can already know what to expect. I'm going to retire when I'm so old. I'm going to do that. And I'm going to die. And that's kind of the expectation. And so for me, the moment in the context of story, of what we spoke of tonight, is that creative edge in which, although the past can add great beauty, and although the past can set a course for the future, it is not absolutely determined. And it is in this moment that the God of possibility can open up opportunities beyond our logic of cause and effect, beyond our logic of how it should unfold, that the God of possibility is the one that makes life continually exciting with possibilities we have not considered. And so I think that is, in the context of story, that is where we are continually open for surprise, where we are continually open for astonishment, bewilderment, falling into love, that we don't fall into the trap of this is just the repetition of the past. So much can be said about accessing that moment, about being present and enjoying it. And there's lots of practices that the meditative practice, I started doing some other practices just to make me present as well, because I can be very much in my mind. But there's a very, very beautiful benefit of just becoming present and losing track of time and just enjoying that moment. Also in the context of story, I would say that what it does to my present is that I'm not constantly searching for the perfect next step. We've met so many precious Christians who are just waiting for God's guidance, or they're just waiting for the prophecy that's been spoken over them just about 15 years ago. They're just waiting for that to happen. And it's all in this place of paralysis. And I'm not moving until God shows me the next step. But it's very difficult to steer a bicycle when it stands still. You just fall off. And so I think what it does for the present is, in appreciating that this God of possibility, I can just decide when start moving. And in the process of moving, it's so much easier to get that guidance, to get that steering, to get that direction. So I tried to take your question and put it in the context of story. I don't know if it answered your question.
No, that's okay. I was just kind of doing it for general.
Okay. Thank you. Well,
I have a question.
yeah.
I'm not cutting you off.
Okay, wow.
It's more a statement. What you just said took me back many, many, many years when my wife and kids were away in Montreal with her sister, and I was alone in the house, desperate to know what God wanted me to do next. Leave government after 22 years in policy at Queen's Park, or video production as a full-time alternative to policy wonking down at Queen's Park. And my most desperate prayer I have ever prayed in my life, in that moment of just silence in the house. And after my meditation, so I was very still, but I was desperately still. I said, God, which way do you want me to go?
Yeah.
And he said, and I heard his voice, the one and only time I've ever heard his voice. He said, Mark, I'll be with you whichever way you go.
Oh, wow. Beautiful, beautiful. Wow, love it. I remember when our kids were small and we'd go to the beach and Eugene, 3-year-old, he loved water and we had quite a strong river running into the ocean. And he would just run for that river. He couldn't swim or nothing, but he'd just be in it. And he'd just go under and I'd have to run and dive, grab him, get him out. But I remember that experience of wherever he goes, I go. And I can experience our Papa saying that. Now we're looking up in what way, and he said, have a bit of fun. I'm with you. Having fun with you. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for being here this evening. And we look forward to tomorrow, where those of you can continue. We've got lots of resources, videos, audios, things that are freely available on our website. It's alwayslove.net. There's a few pamphlets there. And online school, Mimesis Academy, that starts again next year. So please help yourself to that, and thank you very much.
And you're selling, and some of your books are on sale.
Yes. Thank you.